So enough with the pretentious jokes. My goal is not to complain. The first thing that I want to talk about is the design of the device and also the build quality. So this is a very sturdy built device. There is no bending, there is no creaking. Yes, the device is completely made out of plastic as compared to something like the HTC One, but the immediate advantage that you have with having plastic over something like aluminum is not only is it a little bit more durable feeling, such as if you drop it, it doesn't tend to nick and ding like aluminum does, and also it's not as hot in hand. I will get into gameplay with this device, but I do notice that when I'm playing games, this one isn't getting as hot as the HTC One does, doing the same thing, the same strenuous thing for the same amount of time. So it does have its pluses, although I had really hoped that they would change the design of the device. Getting a little bit more into the design in terms of durability, we do have this removable back cover. A lot of people are picking on this back cover because it has this dotted textured appearance. This one might look like a golf ball, there's a gold one that looks like a band-aid, yada yada, I've heard it all. But honestly in hand, just like I've been hearing a lot of other reviewers saying, is it actually is quite supple. It does not feel slippery whatsoever, especially comparing it even to something like the Galaxy S4. So I'm grateful for this. To some it might appear silly, but it really does have a practicality. Samsung did mean well. Also with this back cover, we are able to keep water out of the battery compartment. You can see that actually this O-ring on the back is only covering a marginal part of this back cover. So only around here is where we're going to be protected from this O-ring on the back. That means that everything else inside the phone, including the camera, is going to be fully submerged in water. Even the speaker itself, which I will talk more about later. So the speaker must be protected by a membrane, and we even have the earphone jack being open as well. So if you do take this device around water or you dunk it in water, expect there to be water underneath the back cover that comes up pretty much right to where the O-ring is. Don't worry so much about it. I just recommend drying off the phone, shaking it off before you pull the back cover off. And you just really want to make sure that all of those snaps are closed because it's easy to miss one. And if you do miss one, that rubber O-ring isn't going to be tight like it's supposed to be. Speaking of keeping things nice and tight, you also need to make sure that this port is closed. It seems fairly obvious, but if it's not closed all the way or you forget and you happen to get water in there, you're kind of screwed. What I do like about this is that every time you unplug it, it does give you a warning saying that, oh, make sure that your flap is closed. Some people get annoyed by that, but I think it's a very good way to not let people forget about closing this if they are annoyingly notified every single time. So I have not forgotten yet to make sure that this is closed. They say that it is IP67 certified, so it's dust proof and it's water resistant up to 1 meter for 30 minutes. But the thing is with this, you want to have this in fresh water. You don't want to take it around corrosive materials, even like salt water. And when you put it underneath the water, you don't want to be shaking it about because water can then get past that O-ring seal. I would say it's a very weak seal, and it's able to get into that battery compartment and wreak havoc, probably shorting out your device. So durable against dust, it's plastic so it's not going to bang up all that easily, and you can put it around water, but you don't want to put it near water jets or anything with fast flowing water, even in the shower. I'd imagine that that would just wreak havoc. Now I'm someone who's not a fan of cases, and as you probably noticed, I have what looks like a screen protector. This is actually a glass tempered screen protector by iLume. So rather than putting it in a case and adding more bulk, even though this is protected by Gorilla Glass 3, if I was to drop this, I'm pretty confident that I would still crack the glass. So putting something like a glass screen protector on it just lets me feel pretty comfortable. Otherwise, I'm not so worried about getting little dings or nicks here and there. Although trust me, if you drop this, this is probably what's going to suffer most because this chrome-like metal on here will chip, probably revealing the white underneath the white plastic. So taking a bit of a look around the rest of the device, here we have a 2 megapixel front-facing camera, the ambient light sensor, and also the proximity sensor, and what they're calling the RGB sensor. So it's supposed to be able to adapt the display depending on the environment. We also have a receiver here. We've got a 5.1-inch AMOLED display, full HD 1080p, although it is that diamond matrix pen tile. but still it's just a bit noticeably bigger than what we have on the Galaxy S4, the 4.99-inch display. I think that bit of jump does help just a little bit. We've got a home button and also a fingerprint scanner. I will be talking about that later. And we've also got some capacitive buttons. A lot of people are still fans of these hardware buttons, whether it be this home button here or this new task switcher button, which used to be the menu, although if you hold it down now from wherever you are, just say from the home screen, it does act as the menu button. So if some people really don't like that this is the task switching button, you do have the option also now to use it as the menu. So really not much of a worry. And as always, we have the classic back button as well. Then on the back, we've got the 16 megapixel camera sensor. We've got a single LED flash and also that heart rate sensor, that heart rate monitor. I really don't want to say much about this other than I don't know really who's going to get much use out of this. From my comments in the past, I've seen that maybe nursing students, maybe people who just really want to look at their heart rate in the morning or for whatever reason. But I can't honestly see someone running down the street like this, holding their finger over this at a interval of whatever and seeing what their heart rate looks like. I would much rather use the Gear Watch for that. But it's there. I'm sure it will be fun to show your friends here and there. Though I'm always going to say I wish they would have just included something else like a dual LED flash. Then we've got the speaker right here, which has the membrane, which does make it sound a little bit muffled. But you do have some trade-offs here and there in order to keep the device waterproof. Then at the top we've got a standard headphone jack, we've got an infrared blaster, we've got a microphone, and then there's the other microphone at the bottom along with our flap that keeps the water out. So far, I'm really not sure how I feel about this little flap door here. Of course, the more moving parts that you have, the bigger worry that you have for something like this breaking eventually or just wearing out. That is not going to be pleasant because if this ends up not working anymore, good luck putting it in the water. My recommendation, if at all possible, would be to get the charging cover for the back that allows inductive charging. Samsung is going to be selling that if they're not selling it already. That way you can open up this less, but of course it's going to cost you more and a lot of people aren't going to want to buy another accessory. But if you're worried about having a case and also a charging back cover at the same time because you don't want to get a different back cover that might not work with another case, you can use the S-View window case that Samsung is going to be selling. Not only does it have the inductive charging, but it's also protective like a case. So that's probably what I would go with. But still, anytime you want to plug this into the computer, you're going to have to open this anyway, so it's kind of a lose-lose situation. On the sides, we really don't have much. We've got a volume rocker, which is nice and clicky. It does give a good feedback. And we've also got that power button. I really have always admired where Samsung puts these buttons because they're very easy to access, very easy to press, and they're very natural as well. So in terms of the size versus the Galaxy S4, I did mention that it is bigger. It is bigger in every way. It's also heavier. So lining it up side by side, you can see that it's longer, it's wider, and it's also just a bit thicker. But still, it's a very manageable device. If we look at something like the Galaxy Note 3, it's still significantly smaller than the Galaxy Note 3. So this gives you a little bit of the idea of the footprint. Then if we want to get really anal, here is the Tab Pro 8.4. Here we have the Galaxy Note 3. There we have the Galaxy S5. And then lastly, we have the Galaxy S4. So this really gives you an idea of the size here. So a little bit about the internals before we move on to gameplay. This is the Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 SoC. 4 Crate 400 cores clocked at 2.46 gigahertz. They're calling it 2.5 gigahertz. We've got an Adreno 330 GPU. So this is the MSM 8974AC version of the SoC versus the MSM 8974AB version, which is what we're seeing in devices like the HTC One M8, which is just a little bit lower clocked. We've got about 2 gigabytes of RAM, which figures to be around 1,856 megabytes. Out of the box, we've got Android 4.4.2 KitKat, and what I want to say about this device is that I've had a lot of Samsung devices, as you've seen during my pile-up, that I've got a bunch of different Samsung devices. I've spent a lot of quality time with Samsung devices, and in the past I've been really annoyed by how laggy the Touch-Wiz is. Now this isn't 100% perfect, but I think this is the best performance that we have so far in terms of Touch-Wiz. This device is very quick, it's very responsive, it seldom misses a beat. Even over the Galaxy Note 3 I do notice the leap up in performance, so I don't have any complaints really to speak of. We're gonna have people complaining about certain things being laggy because of S-lag here and there, but I have really enjoyed how fast this is finally. If for some reason you notice a lot of lags going on, or if it's not as fast as, just say something like the HTC One M8, you can see that yes, the gallery does take a little bit longer to get into. I would recommend going underneath developer options and turning off the animations. The only thing with that is it looks a bit jarring when you turn them off. So just say, for example, it's like bloop, it's really jarring. And you can turn things off like S-Voice, and then if you want to, you can even get a different launcher. For example, I have Nova Launcher on here, and a lot of people report a lot better performance if they are bothered by the S-lag, or if for some reason their device has more S-lag than another one. So now if we go underneath something like Gallery, pushing it on the same time, you can see that it's very snappy. It's a little bit less behind the HTC One M8, but still people argue that the performance becomes better. While some people are not going to call this a fix or a solution, at least it does make it more bearable. Also, some people may not know that if for some reason you don't like My Magazine, which is kind of like Blink Feed on the M8, or really Samsung's answer to Flipboard, you just want to go to the main screen, hold down the menu button. Underneath home screen settings, this is kind of convoluted and I wouldn't know this is there immediately. I kind of had to search for it. You can see it says My Magazine, along with transition effect, which is right now a card stack. You can change that as well. So My Magazine can be unchecked. And now you can see that it's no longer there intruding and being a problem with lag or whatever else. So you can definitely disable it. Now as far as gameplay, I really don't have anything to complain about. It's been nice and smooth. It's been a very good experience. I broke out my Moga game controller and played Asphalt 8 for a nice period of time. I didn't see any noticeable slowdowns. So I think that most people will be just fine and perfectly happy with the performance of gameplay on the Galaxy S5. I do notice that the device can get pretty warm after a while of playing games. Usually that's once you hit the 20-minute mark or so. I am happy that it does not get as warm as on the Galaxy S4. I really experienced the device getting quite hot in the Galaxy S4, and I have not experienced that same thing with the Galaxy S5. I'd be curious to hear if other people are experiencing something different. If you have a device that gets really hot during gameplay, please let me know. During some benchmarks, I noticed that it can get pretty warm, but it's nothing like as hot as the HTC One M8 is. Now, just because this device doesn't get as hot as the HTC One M8, that doesn't mean that the performance is as good as the HTC One M8, because metal is really good at pulling heat away from the device itself and dissipating it elsewhere, where plastic is not as great at doing that. So from the interwebs, I see that the HTC One M8 performs a little bit better in benchmarks. I really don't care so much for benchmarks. What I care about is real-world performance. But one thing that I did do, because I was curious to see how this device behaved after a long run of gameplay or after a long run of benchmarking. So I did a run of GFX benchmark the entire suite. When I did that, I had Trepin Profiler running, which is Qualcomm's own program. So I was able to profile system, and then afterwards I was able to analyze the run. And I did this both with the device in water and with the device out of water. I did like how AnandTech did this, so I had to test this out for myself. So indeed, I did get better results when the device was in the water rather than outside of the water. So here we have the results for in water. You can see that the overall CPU frequency is quite high, quite constant actually between the cores. Then looking at the GPU frequency, it's 458.62 megahertz. Then if we look at the device when it was outside of the water, you can see that the overall CPU frequency was lower. So check that out, 1600 versus somewhere around 1100, and these ones are much lower. But for the GPU, we have 458.62 versus 446 megahertz, so that's not a huge overall decrease. And during gameplay, I'm not seeing a huge decline. Now keep in mind, this is over for about 15 minutes. So we can go ahead and actually look at the graphs themselves. So you can see outside of the water, inside of the water, outside of the water, inside of the water. There does seem to be a difference. And if we go and look at the GPU, these are actually the other cores. Here we have the GPU. Now this is inside of the water, and this is outside of the water. Inside, outside. You can see that the behavior is pretty similar between inside and outside of the water for the GPU. So indeed, I'm not seeing a terrible performance decline even after about 15 minutes of gameplay, which is great. The CPU frequency does decline, but the overall gameplay doesn't seem to suffer from it. Now keep in mind, this was done with the benchmark, and I did do this with gameplay as well and got very similar results inside and outside of the water. I am curious to know what happens after an hour, 2 hours, if you are someone who plays solid all the way until the phone is dead. I don't foresee many people doing that on a smartphone, but if you have a Moga game controller, who knows, you might. But still, for the casual gamer, after 15 minutes, you're still doing just fine for gameplay. Now moving on to the display, you can see I have the Galaxy S4 here. Now the display on the Galaxy S5 is 5.1 inches over the 4.99 inches on the Galaxy S4. It does make a little bit of a difference, and I do appreciate that difference. Also, it's nice that even though this display is a bit bigger, I don't see a huge reduction in pixel density. So that's 432 pixels about there versus 441 pixels per inch. So the difference is not profound at all. What's immediately noticeable to me by eye is that the color temperatures of these displays are very different. What's on the Galaxy S4 was more neutral, kind of more on the warm side, versus what we have on the Galaxy S5, which is more bluish. It's actually quite blue. It kind of reminds me of what LCDs look like when they're really quite blue. I'm not a fan of cool temperature displays. It just doesn't look right for the white balance at all. So that is probably my number one gripe about the display. Also, I'm noticing that these really are not the same display at all. I don't think that the manufacturing process is the same at all either. What I notice about this display is that it kind of has a grainy appearance to it. That's something that I don't see on the Galaxy S4 or on the Note 3. It kind of reminds me of the older AMOLED displays. The older AMOLED displays like on the Galaxy Nexus, which had kind of a grainy appearance to it. Except for this is still 1,000 times better than the graininess on the older AMOLED displays, but still, I can see it. It's not something that anyone is going to notice probably. You probably need to have a very trained eye to see what I'm talking about. There are some nice things about this display though. It does get very, very bright, especially if you go outside on a sunny day, hit auto brightness, and it's going to really punch up that brightness. It's well over 600 nits. What's also nice about this display is that it gets very, very dark as well. So if I take this slider, I can go all the way down, and you really can't see that it's on anymore. If you're in a dark room, you can, and I really think this is going to help save battery life, because in a dark room, it's not necessary to have brightness that's very bright. So putting it on the lowest brightness can be just good enough for some people. So you can see it looks pretty much off, versus what we have on the Galaxy S4, and you can see the screen pretty well even with all this crazy ambient reflective lighting. So very much a marked improvement. Just be careful, because now I can't find the slider. That's not good. Aha, here it is. The thing that's really quite lovely about the AMOLED displays are the viewing angles. You can see next to the HTC One M8, it just can't compete. It loses brightness from the side. Here head on, they both look nice, but then you can really tell this is where AMOLED displays shine. This is definitely where the S5 shines. So if you're looking for a device with unmatchable viewing angles, that has to be the Galaxy S5. Also, this display really pops because it has those very saturated colors. Some people like them, some people don't. So we have a display that gets much brighter, we have a display that can get a lot darker. So those things are only a very small smidgen of what makes a good display a good display. Another thing that I want to do is show you some measurements that were taken from the Galaxy S5. What I was able to do was take measurements with the colorimeter and input them into a program called HCFR, which lets me look at some graphs to see what's going on with the grayscale of the device or how the device is behaving, and also lets me check out color accuracy. I did that for 2 different modes. I did that for the cinema mode, which everyone just raves about, and I also did that for the standard mode, which is what it's on right now. Now, to start off with, I want to talk about color accuracy. Now, I realize that a lot of people don't necessarily care about color accuracy. People want to have displays that are punchy or that are eye-catching, so sometimes color accuracy kind of gets put on the back burner. But for those of you out there who are curious, or for those of you who are photographers or who like to watch videos and do want color accuracy, I just want to show you a little bit about the Galaxy S5 display in terms of color accuracy. Now, the Galaxy S5 has a display that pops or that is oversaturated for a couple of different reasons. For the first reason, it's a wide gamut display. Most content is meant for sRGB gamut, including the internet, like content on the internet. Even the Android operating system is built around sRGB content. So if you take sRGB content, which is the smaller triangle that we see here, and we stretch it to the wider triangle, that's the wider gamut that we have of the Galaxy S5, it's going to stretch those points that you see, those data points, and it ends up making the display look more saturated. Then Samsung tends to take those saturation points and saturate them even further to give it extra punch. So of course, when we're meant to have content that is sRGB and we stretch it to being a wider gamut and they oversaturate, it's not going to be color accurate. For some people it looks nice, but just know that it's not accurate. Now, if you do not like the standard mode, you do not like how it looks, Samsung does provide a couple of extra modes, one of which is called the cinema mode, and the cinema mode kind of gives it a cinema effect. It tends to undersaturate it a little bit, and it's just meant just for your own viewing pleasure should you want to. Just one thing that I'm starting to see around the internet is that it's accurate, it's color accurate, but no, it's not. That's just completely wrong information. I don't think Samsung ever meant it to be accurate. It's just simply a mode, and I just want you to see this as to why it's not accurate. It can't be accurate for sRGB content because the gamut triangle still stretches outside of sRGB, and also I can see that they're tweaking the colors. You can look at the magenta, and as the saturation is increasing, they're changing the hue, so it's becoming a different color as the saturation is increasing. That just creates some interesting effect. Green is doing a bit of the same thing, and I don't even want to get into the craziness of the other colors. These saturation points should be in a straight line and evenly spaced, so we just don't see that here. It's just not color accurate. I don't necessarily like this effect very much. It does do a job at where it tends to undersaturate, so you don't get such punchy colors, but the colors look really off to me. But it's up to you if you like this effect or not, honestly. Just keep in mind, it's an effect. It is not meant to be color accurate. One good thing about the cinema mode is that the temperature of the display becomes a little bit more sane. It's quite blue in standard mode, but it becomes more towards neutral in the cinema mode, so that is one thing that I can commend it on. Although what I see on both of them is a bit weird, because as we go from a lighter part of an image to a darker part of an image, I can see that the color temperature is going more and more towards blue, so it's a little bit off. Then if we look at gamma for both of them, they both have a gamma that's a bit too high. When you adjust gamma and make it too high, it makes an image darker, and it also makes an image look more saturated, so it does help with the punchiness of an image. But again, it's up to you whether you like this or not. I know Samsung is heading for an effect that's eye-catching to really get people's attention. And people can see a much wider range of colors that sRGB presents. So of course, when you look at a very wide gamut display that looks punchy, it's appealing to the eye. But in some circumstances, and if you are wanting to watch videos or movies, people's faces can look too saturated, that skin tones just don't look right. Some greens can just be way too punchy. For some people that looks pretty, and for others it just is a little bit of an eyesore, so it's up to you. I'm always going to wish that things are color accurate because I'm just a stickler for that. But if you like it, that's really all up to your opinion. That's totally fine. Although I wish there was a mode that was called the color accurate mode. So now getting into features, shenanigans, and more. So as I mentioned to you, this is Android 4.4.2 KitKat right out of the box. If you pinch here, you can bring up the menu. Also, like I showed you, you can hold down here and it brings up the menu as well. And you can see we've got several features at the bottom, kind of reminiscent of what we have on the Nexus 5. So instead of on the Nexus 5, when you go to the right here, it brings up My Magazine instead of Google Now. Underneath My Magazine, it really is like Flipboard. It is some type of an iteration of Flipboard. You can set it to auto refresh on opening. You can choose to have different types of news feeds. You can also include certain social networking here, Google+, YouTube, Twitter. So it's your go-to place for news and updates. And if it's something that you absolutely despise, go ahead, go underneath home screen settings and just tick that off. Bye-bye. On the Galaxy S5, we have an obnoxious new settings panel. You can see we've got all these multicolored bubbles that don't seem to have any color coding whatsoever. I really can't seem to find anything with it listed this way. It's actually kind of angering, but if you don't want to look at it this way, you simply can change it back to the way that it was before. You can hit list view, and there you are. It brings you into a list. Still have those bubbles, but at least you can kind of pan through it. At least it's something that we're used to. And we also have tab view if you need to have things organized categorically. So it's not all bad, but this is just silly. Why? There is one virtue with this layout though. We do have something new that's called quick settings. At least I think this is new. This isn't something I've seen before. So when you go underneath settings, you have this crazy amount of icons that I showed you, except for what I did was I just closed down all these boxes. I minimized them. Then underneath the edit quick settings, I picked the settings from each of these that I wanted to keep. So things that are only relevant to me. So I just exited out of it, I compressed everything again, and here are the settings that I only want to look at. I don't want to pay attention to any of that other nonsense. So this does let you consolidate things at least. Now don't confuse this quick settings panel right here with what we have here. This is actually different. This is the quick settings toggle, and this is quick settings inside of settings. It's a little bit convoluted and confusing, but just play with it. So just as we are familiar with from before, we do still have motions and gestures, and we still do have air view. So we can go underneath motions and gestures, air browse, where you can move your hand over the sensor here and you can pan through photos in the gallery, or you can make a web page go up and down. You still have direct call, smart alert, mute and pause, palm swipe to capture. So it does look like everything that was on the Galaxy S4 is still on here. Just looks maybe like they've organized it a little bit better. Then we have air view, so you can put your finger over something like a calendar, or you can put your finger over a box in the gallery to see what an album is. You can use it to preview scenes in the video player. So this is definitely something that we've all seen before. Some people have asked me, do they keep all this still? Are all those things still there? All those gimmicks? Yes, they are. Now, Samsung has also added or improved some other functionalities. There's a couple that I want to look at. One of them that's kind of cool that I saw on the Galaxy Note 3 is called one-handed operation. This is for people with itty-bitty tiny hands. So take your thumb, go backward like a check mark almost, and you're presented with a very small view of the entire operating system. So you can make it larger. This is the smallest that it gets. You're also able to drag it around and place it where you'd like to. Left, right, depending on your handedness. We truly do have access to everything. It's a fully functioning operating system, just in very small size. So I can kind of reach across now. So underneath memo, I can say hello there. Nope, that didn't work. Hello there. What language is that? Hi. Okay. Hello. There. Young child. Okay, well, I give up. If I had a chance to actually be paying attention to what I'm doing, that might look nicer. Hartford, Curry, Tire, hi, hello, hi there, is you Gurk Ugly. Yeah. Alright, this time I held it close to my face so I can actually see what I was doing, and it does work pretty convincingly. Then if you don't want it like this anymore, you can simply just tap here. It extends it to full screen again, and I'm going right back to where I was. So that's a pretty fun feature. And if you give it a chance, it really does work. I also like what's been done with multi-window. There is one setting that I really do prefer. It's called Open in Multi-Window View. Automatically view content in multi-window view when you open files from My Files or video or attachments from emails and messages in full screen view. So this is something that's actually been quite practical, and I'm going to show you a demonstration of that. But if you don't want this on here, which you can actually move anywhere that you'd like, you can simply just turn it off. The thing I noticed is that if you keep this on, this little button here is going to stay there even if you are watching videos. So if you're in Netflix, it's just going to sit there. Another one that just sits there is this toolbar. I will talk about that in a minute. So if you don't want this in the way, you need to actually go in underneath multi-window setting and turn it off. So now underneath my email account, I picked some random spam email from eBay. I'm sure this is just going to encourage eBay to send me more spam, so that's a win-win situation, right? So to show you how the multi-window view thing works, let's just say here's this appealing Asus 15-inch something or another. So we're going to go ahead and check it out. We're going to use Chrome. You can see that it has a bubble here, a bubble window that's not intruding with our previous task. So we can grab this, we can resize it, we can move it out of the way, we can select between both windows. So if I touch this window, it becomes the dominant window. If I touch this window, this becomes the dominant window. So you're able to switch back and forth, you can see that. Also, you're able to touch, and it brings up some settings. So what you're able to do is switch them. Now you can see that the email is at the bottom and the ad is at the top. Then we can also use this feature to make heartfelt documents. You see, you can go in here in the multi-window view. You can pick a few programs of your choice. I chose the gallery and also the memo app. So underneath the gallery, I picked some random image, and then I can grab it like this and I can drop it here. And it puts it, well, hopefully where you should put it. Make sure that your cursor is where it should be. But you're able to do certain tasks back and forth. So for the last setting, you're able to choose your dominant window. If I want to get rid of the window on the top, I just need to select it and hit the X. And if I want to get rid of the window at the bottom, I select it and I can hit X. And you see I'm left with only the memo window. So that's quite nice. Now, although I liked that setting once in a while, I found it to be annoying. So you just need to uncheck this. So anytime we go back into that email, let's go ahead and pick this laptop thing again using Chrome, and you can see that it opens it up, but it doesn't put that multi-window split view. So that's really your choice. We've also got a setting that's called Toolbox. So if you go underneath Toolbox, and if you have it on, it says access your favorite applications and features quickly with Toolbox. So basically we've got this little bubble here that it's hiding. Until you touch it, it becomes active. When you touch it again, it's going to bring up little shortcuts to applications that are your favorite. So we can go ahead and say edit, and you're free to choose anything that's installed on the phone, it looks like. And you're only allowed to have a maximum of 5. So I would have to go find the things that I have already selected, uncheck it, and add something else like cooking. So then I say save, and always now when I hit this toolbox thing, you see I've got cooking. So this is a handy little feature, but like I mentioned, this is a feature that's going to stay around all the time, even when you're inside of the video player or watching Netflix. It does dim and become less obvious, as you see there. But it's something that I don't prefer to have on all the time. It's a nice feature, but I honestly ended up not using it just because it was in my view. Now moving right along, we also have a mode that's called private mode. This is something that I actually really like about this phone. I'm seeing some phones now put this type of a mode out. And what I like about this one is that it's really hidden. You can't see that it's there. You don't know when it's on unless you're aware of it. So going underneath private mode, you can say on. And so I can enter my PIN. And when I put on private mode, what it does is reveal everything that I had hidden before. So now up here we can see private mode is on. So if I go underneath my gallery, you can see that there is an album right here that's called private. And everything here I was able to move onto this private folder. So if I have some pictures or something that I just don't want people to see, I can easily conceal it. Then if I go back underneath private mode and I turn this off, if I go back and look at the gallery, you can see that no longer is that private mode folder there, so you just don't know that there is something concealed on this phone. So that's quite ingenious. I like that. I've seen this type of thing elsewhere, and it kind of just has the program sitting there still, but if you click on the program, it makes you enter some type of PIN or code, but this really is pretty incognito. So you can see if you go underneath Samsung's program called My Files, it's their own file explorer. You can select several different files. In this case, just say I want to select all, and I can say move, and then I can choose private. I can choose the partition for private, and that's where everything's going to stay hidden. So I can say move here, and quickly everything is moved exactly where it needs to be. And again, I can turn private mode off. And when I go back underneath this My Files, you can see that that partition just seems to disappear. It's indeed hiding, so I really do like that. Also, a really good thing is that you don't have to just use a PIN. Just say that you don't think a PIN is secure enough or even a password is secure enough. So this is somewhere where I think the fingerprint scanner would do a lot of good. That pretty much ensures that someone is not going to be able to get into your private partition. For purposes like this, I can see this fingerprint scanner having a lot of good purpose. But in general, I kind of find this fingerprint reader to be a little bit cumbersome and hard to use. A lot of people will probably argue with me on that. But for someone who has a very small hand like myself, it's just pretty much impossible to be able to hold the device and unlock it at the same time with my thumb. So it's something that's definitely a two-hand deal. I have to hold it, and I also have to use my index finger or thumb or whatever finger I register. So I said okay. Now when you are making a fingerprint, you can use your thumb, you can use your finger, you can use a different hand. Now what you're supposed to do, or at least what Samsung instructs, is you're supposed to use your index finger and you're supposed to swipe the same way every single time with the pad of your finger touching the entire button. Now what I've seen other people do is instead of doing the same thing every single time, I've seen some other people go from an angle. Let's see if I can get it to do it. Nah, it doesn't want to do it. Sometimes with the thumb. Oh yeah, there we go. And I can go from a different angle. Let's try it again. It doesn't like me very much. Yeah, so it really didn't like me doing that. So let's go ahead and try with the thumb then. So we're going to go straight downward. Then we're going to go from a different angle. And you can see that works with the thumb. So we're going to go with a different angle again. And we're going to go downward again. Then we're going to go from this angle. So yeah, definitely with the thumb you can go from a different orientation. And it seems to help with being able to unlock it from a couple different orientations. Like that. And then like that. Then you need to enter a PIN or alternative password. So now my private content can be unlocked using my thumbprint in a couple of different orientations. Let's try to prove this theory. There we go. So that took 3 tries. And then we can try the thumb from this way. It unlocks it as well. So you see you can register your finger in a couple different orientations, but there is no promise that it's going to work every single time. And that's what really gets me about this fingerprint sensor, is it's really kind of hit and miss. Sometimes it works really well, and other times it's just a royal pain in the neck. There we go. So now when we go back underneath our quick settings and I hit fingerprint scanner, you can see I've got that one fingerprint that's already registered. I can register 2 more fingerprints. Basically, I can register the amount of fingerprints that's allowed here. I can have 1 for screen unlock, I can have 1 for verifying Samsung account, and I can have 1 for paying with PayPal. What I like about the T-Mobile version of the device is that T-Mobile doesn't ruin anything, they don't take anything away, they don't change the functionality of the device. I think the Verizon version of the Galaxy S5 doesn't even have this option anymore. So you can register 3 fingerprints for 3 separate options. In the future, I would really like to see better functionality with this, because as frustrating as this fingerprint reader is, it needs to have more functionality than just 3 silly things. Phew, this is a lot of things to show you. So now we're going to show you the power saving mode. We've got a power saving mode and also an ultra power saving mode For the power saving mode, you basically can restrict background data, you can restrict performance, you can turn on grayscale, so instead of the display being in color, you can change everything to being black and white. So it looks pretty much like that. It's kind of fun to play with that way. It's supposed to save battery life. So then we can go back underneath the power saving mode and turn the grayscale off. You see it brings it back to normal. Then we have the ultra power saving mode, which just lets you use 6 different applications. It prevents all background data from running except from these 6 applications. So you can see that once I'm underneath the ultra power saving mode, at the bottom you can see how much estimated standby that we have. It looks like it's 7 days, 56% battery. So if you're stuck at really low battery, you can last for quite a long time. So this can be a pretty genius thing if you get stuck in a really bad situation without any way to charge your phone. So if you have a battery that's at 56%, you can last for 7 days with a phone, at least being able to try to call out. You see, you can add a couple of other applications. They are limited. You can't choose anything that you want. And we also have access to very limited settings as well. This is it: Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, airplane mode, mobile networks, location, sound, and brightness. So this is a really nifty thing, and I think it actually works quite well. So I'm curious to see if there's a time that I would actually use this. So now, playing around with the heart rate sensor, the first thing that I want to show you is where it says this is not for clinical or medical use. I would pay attention to that because I kind of find it to be a little bit erratic at times. I'll be sitting down in my chair. I haven't moved for several minutes, so I know I'm sitting at a resting heart rate. And you can actually log all of your different heart rates. And what I see is it's kind of bouncing around here and there sometimes. Sometimes it looks normal. This is a good run, 78, 77, 78, 76. But suddenly it starts to bounce upward into the 80s. So you can see it goes 80, 75, 75, 82, 85, 77, 80, 82. That's kind of really bouncing all over the place. So I think for a well-meaning person who really doesn't realize that this isn't 100% accurate, you might end up thinking you've got problems with heart palpitations or something. I don't have problems with heart palpitations, but I can see that I get a varying amount of results. This is about accurate. What I would do is really just pay attention to the average, and still that seems a bit high for my resting heart rate. So I think that this really is just a toy for fun. What's also interesting is it's just this little sensor on the back. It's just an LED light that shines outward when it senses your fingers there. And whatever feedback it gets from it, it sends into this other light sensor here. So when you place your finger on the sensor, you can see that it lights up there. It detects a pulse, it sends it into the other light sensor, and it gives you a reading. The interesting thing about this heart rate sensor is that they did not need to even build this into it. Even with something like the Galaxy S4, there are programs that work just as well, if not even better. These programs work by shining the LED out at your finger, and the feedback is sent into the camera sensor instead. And I have found that to work quite well, so I'm kind of confused as to why Samsung needed to add this little gimmick here. So it's fun, but I don't even think it's all that accurate. That's really all I have to say. Another thing that I want to mention about S-Health, besides heart rate, is that they did get rid of something underneath here. I remember that there was a category that was called comfort level. That's not there anymore. Basically, it had the ability to read from a thermometer and also checked out what the ambient humidity was. That was something that I actually really liked and used on the Galaxy S4. If I felt really hot during the summer or something was really uncomfortable and I didn't know if it was me or if it was the room, I was able to go underneath comfort level and see what was going on with the ambient humidity, and it actually worked quite well in mine. So they did remove that, but it probably has something to do with the fact that this device goes underneath water. I'm not quite sure, but they did remove it. So now I want to take a little bit of a look at the download booster. Like I said, this is the T-Mobile version, and luckily T-Mobile did not decide to disable the download booster, unlike Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint. The other major United States carriers just did not want to see the download booster on their devices. Now, if you don't have this feature, it's not an absolute big deal, especially if you're in the United States for a very good reason. We don't have unlimited data. We have a data cap of some kind, and so if you are going to be using Wi-Fi and LTE at the same time, you're going to be using up your data pretty quickly if you use the download booster all the time. So my reasoning is that I have very good Wi-Fi at home. I really don't need to have a feature like Download Booster, and neither do a lot of people, but maybe on the go, if you've got slow reception or you're in a hotel room where you have slow Wi-Fi, you can mix your LTE reception and also your Wi-Fi reception. And you can download a couple files if you need. You can install certain games and things. I actually took some notes about what I noticed is working and what's not working. So, for example, you can use the Download Booster for downloading apps in the Google Play Store. You can use it to download videos in the Video Play Store. Yes, you can also use it for YouTube. And some things I'm noticing that it's not working for is I can't use it with Google Drive. So I can't download Google Drive files any quicker. If I try to download videos from Google Plus, I notice that it doesn't go any faster either. I notice it doesn't work for Dropbox, and no, it does not work for Speed Test. The other thing to mention about Download Booster is that if a certain connection is stronger, if your Wi-Fi is stronger, or if your LTE is stronger, if one or the other is stronger, it's just not going to work. And you also need to have a file that's larger than 30 megabytes. So if you find anything else that it works in, I would be happy to hear about it. And probably the biggest one I noticed that it does not work for is torrenting. I know a lot of you know what torrenting is. So if you want to torrent something, it doesn't work for that. Just to let you know. So what it really does work for mostly is downloading apps from the Google Play Store or downloading videos from Google Play Store as well. So for example, if I go underneath My Movies, I can hit the pin button here and it starts to download my video, and in just a second it's going to ask me Download Booster, download large files over 30 megabytes faster using Wi-Fi and LTE. So you're able to use both data streams at the same time, Wi-Fi and LTE. So let's go ahead and say OK, and you can see how this works. Now my LTE is not the most fantastic right now, but I am getting 12 megabits per second down, 10 megabits. You can see that my internet's very fast, and once it's just not enough on LTE, the Download Booster is probably going to shut down. There we are, 73, 12. And then there you go, LTE network too slow. So that lets you see how that works. I think that this is a pretty cool feature, but it's really not something that I care so much about whatsoever. It is very neat, though, that T-Mobile is that one carrier who actually has this on here. I actually want to show you, some people tried to get it enabled on the AT&T version. They were able to go into the phone, put on a different launcher, and add a shortcut, but still without rooting the phone, you're not able to get the Download Booster working. So just to show you that the Download Booster doesn't work on the AT&T version with just adding this shortcut back, I'm going to go ahead and put Download Booster on. In order for Download Booster to work, it will tell you that it's working. So when you hit this here, we're going to see your videos are downloading, and the Download Booster should pop up, and it's definitely not doing that. It's not downloading any faster than when I have it on or off, so it really doesn't matter. I do have very, very fast internet speed at home, so it's really not necessary, but you can see that no Download Booster is enabled. So only root can fix this. Now moving on to connectivity such as call quality. This is a phone, and sometimes we tend to forget that our smartphones are actually phones. So call quality is nice. I don't hear anything weird, any odd distortions or anything. People can hear me just fine as well. I do have to remark about speakerphone though. As a lot of people have probably already noticed or heard, the speakerphone on this device is not good at all. I think that the Galaxy S4 sounded just so much better. There's got to be some type of a membrane or gasket or something that's keeping the water from going inside of this speaker here, because it's actually just open to the elements. And anytime you put a membrane or a gasket or something over it in order to keep water out, it can end up sounding like a plastic bag is covering it. So I think that the speaker is loud at least, but it sounds muffled to me. So speakerphone isn't all that impressive. When I'm using GPS navigation, it kind of sounds like a whisper. It's really annoying when I was using GPS navigation. The voice that's coming out of this is just terrible. So they have taken some steps back with the speaker in order to make this waterproof, but general call quality is alright. Also, when it comes to LTE, I'm a little bit disappointed with the Galaxy S5 because I thought it would be more like the Xperia Z2, the D6503 version of the Xperia Z2, which pretty much has global LTE. So I noticed between the European model and also the United States models that I might have some issues with taking this over to France and using it global LTE. There are a lot of LTE bands on here, but it's missing one, like the 800 band. So that's a little bit disappointing. And the European version is missing both the 700 and 1700 megahertz bands. So even though they have a lot more LTE bands, I would still call this market dependent. I haven't had any issues with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or GPS. This has got 2 Wi-Fi antennas now inside of it. Theoretically, this is able to have higher Wi-Fi speeds now from other devices. I do notice that I'm consistently getting a little bit better Wi-Fi scores from either the Z2 or the M8. So I really can't complain about the Wi-Fi. I haven't had any issues with reception on this guy either. So of course, your speed is going to vary depending on your router, depending on your internet service, depending on how far you are away from your router. But this is just a result that I have seen. This device uses Bluetooth 4.0 low energy, which you can use to connect a bunch of peripheral devices such as the Gear 2 watch. Samsung has a bunch of Bluetooth capable devices that can be connected to the S5. Even though the speaker really does not sound very nice, at least in GPS, I haven't had any issues whatsoever. Sometimes with a smartphone here and there, I'll see a bunch of problems with latency on turns, sometimes telling me that I have gone off a different turn instead of still going in the same direction that I was trying to go, so I think I went the wrong way or I ended up going the wrong way. I haven't had any issues with this, thankfully. The GPS has been pretty good, pretty accurate. Now, as for battery life, underneath the hood we've got a 2,800 milliamp hour battery, up from the 2,600 milliamp hour battery that was inside of the Galaxy S4. I don't know why Samsung can't just give us a 3,000 milliamp hour battery, because it's not going to last as long as something like the LG G2 still. I don't understand how 200 milliamp hours of a boost is enough to justify the leap in the screen size, the fact that the screen also gets brighter, and the fact that the device is more powerful. So yes, we can easily get through the day. I am able to get through a 16, 18-hour day without much issue. If I'm really using it, I will get about 3.5 hours of screen time. If it's about mid-usage, I can get about 4 hours. And if I'm easy on it, I can get about 5 hours. But I haven't been able to break that 6-hour screen mark like I have been able to with the G2. So the battery life definitely is decent, but it's nothing phenomenal. And sometimes I feel like, wow, the battery life is really good. That is if I'm not doing anything intensive. And then suddenly if I start using the camera, if I start playing games, I start seeing the battery go down really quickly. I think that's to be as expected. And we do have some power saving modes now, although I don't consider the ultra power saving mode actually usable. To use it as a full-blown Android phone, it really knocks it down to being a dummy phone. But you can use the regular power saving mode to knock down the CPU performance. A lot of people don't need the entire performance of a device. So if you want to boost that screen time even more, I'd probably just use that power saving mode. Decent battery life, but it's really nothing phenomenal. Lastly, I want to look at the camera because there's a lot of goodies in this camera. I really do like what they've done with the camera. It's 16 megapixels now over the 13 megapixels that was on the Galaxy S4. We have a very fast focusing lens. My object to look at today is a Nano Baby. I'm sure a lot of you remember this. So I really like what Samsung has done with the interface. They've really cleaned it up, made it a lot easier to use. I remember handing the Galaxy S4 to my mom and she didn't know what to do with it. There were so many menus and so many things to go through. But she did actually quite like what the Galaxy S4 looked like in terms of menu design. I like how they have the settings on this side now. It's not incredibly overwhelming. We can choose 3 quick short settings here, and you can change those easily by going underneath the settings. You can see that this becomes a gray box, letting you know that you can drag things outward. And you can put anything that you wish in here. These 2 stay at all times, so this is the settings. We never have to worry about where the settings is or how to get into it. And this simply lets us just switch from the front-facing to the back-facing camera. On this side, we've got the camera. You can start the video camera, and we've got mode. Then just underneath that is how you get into the gallery to look at pictures that you've taken. What I really like of what they've done is with modes, they've tidied this up so much. There used to be so many settings under here, and now there's just a few. We've got auto, beauty face, shot and more, panorama, virtual tour, dual camera. I've got a couple examples of a lot of these too. But underneath shot and more, instead of there being a bunch of settings for shot and more, if you know you're going to be taking a picture of something that's going to take a lot of shots at one time, that's when you would use shot and more. So just for example, I'm going to do this. It's going to take many consecutive shots. Then it does processing and it decides which of these have appeared in here. So you can use best photo, best face, drama shot, eraser, panning shot. Depending on which one lights up, this is what I can use as best photo. So it's a lot easier to use now. Also, from here we can download other camera applications. Looks like from Samsung's store. So to look a little bit more underneath settings, you can see starting here we've got 16 megapixels, so you can choose the resolution of the image. The native resolution of the sensor is 16:9. Then you can use 12 megapixels, which is 4/3. You can use 9 megapixels, which is a 1:1. That would be a square image. You've got 8 megapixels, 4:3, 6 megapixels, 16:9, 2.4 megapixels, 16:9. You've got the ability for burst shot, picture stabilization, face detection. Now I just need to make sure that the HDR setting is off right here because I realized that some of these were blacked out. So when you're underneath full auto mode, you have the full ability to use all of these options. Next, you can use ISO, so you can decide if you want it to be auto ISO or to control that yourself. You can choose the metering. You can choose to turn on the touch to the screen to take a picture mode, selective focus, which is something I put over here underneath the short settings. And I've got a couple of photo examples of those. Then you have the ability to choose Ultra HD, Full HD, HD, or VGA. So this is like a 4K type setting. Now, unfortunately, when you use this particular setting, you are losing a lot of different things such as dual camera, HDR, video effects, remote viewfinder, taking pictures while recording video. You lose a lot of functionality. Another thing that you can see is that there's no video stabilization at all once under Ultra HD mode. This lens has no optical image stabilization, but you do have the digital image stabilization under everything but the UHD mode. So that's a bit unfortunate. You also don't have video stabilization actually underneath the VGA mode, but for everything else you have it on there. You've also got the option for your recording mode, slow motion, fast motion, smooth motion. You've got audio zoom. You can add effects, flash, timer. This is the HDR. The HDR is really nice. What I love is that the HDR setting is live view, so you can see a real live preview of what HDR photos are going to look like instead of taking that photo and then seeing afterwards how the HDR came out. And the HDR rocks. I can just say that they've done a really great job with the HDR. I've got a couple of samples to show you with those as well. And then we've got a couple of other various settings, location tags, memory card, review pics photos, auto white balance exposure, guidelines, shutter sounds, voice control, and then you can reset everything back to default. And if you really don't know what's going on with this, you can use the help mode. And it guides you through a lot of different things of what this camera can do. So it's a really nice camera and I've enjoyed using it. Pretty much one of my favorite things is just how fast it can focus and take pictures. I did take a lot of different samples. I want to show those to you. I took pictures, I took video, I took 4K video. I also did some samples of some of the fun modes. So let's go and check those out. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I'm also going to put a link in the description to get to my Google Plus page, because when I'm not making video reviews, I like to post progress or other various things on there, and you can interact with me there. This is a nice device. It's definitely not what we were all expecting, but it does have a lot of good features. I think that a lot of people are going to be very happy with this device. In all honesty, I think that some of the features that we were expecting in this device might make it into the Galaxy Note 4. I'm really curious to see that. The Galaxy S series kind of seems to be more of a consumer end device now, whereas the Note series seems more of the professional or geek device. So it's got a lot of features. Some people will use them, some won't. It's got a nice camera. That display, a lot of people are really going to love. And the fact that it's waterproof does give a little bit more reassurance that it's not going to get damaged, although it's kind of a fail with these ports that are being covered here. I think they're just going to wear off eventually. So please let me know what you think of this device, if this would be the device that you want to purchase, or if you're more wanting to wait to see what else Samsung comes out with, or if you're interested in one of the other devices. So let me know, and have a good night, everybody!